I didn't move here to stand out. In fact, I moved here to disappear. After 20 years designing tactical systems for special operations, some of which still don't officially exist, I thought I'd earned a little silence. I bought a modest house at the end of a cul-de-sac in a suburban neighborhood so aggressively average it practically screamed anonymity. My plan was simple: fix up old motorcycles, maybe take a few small consulting contracts under the radar, and live out the rest of my days in peace. No headlines, no agencies, and absolutely no HOA drama. I should have known better. The first sign of trouble came not from within, but from the outside. A clipboard, a measuring tape, and a woman named Karen. She introduced herself like a mission briefing. Firm handshake, plastic smile, eyes that scanned like biometric sensors. Her first words were, "Just making sure your mailbox complies with HOA height regulations." I was still unloading boxes from my truck. I offered a non-committal grunt and turned back to my garage. "What's in there?" she asked, nodding toward the reinforced titanium doors. "Tools," I replied. Not a lie, just not the whole truth. I figured that'd be the end of it. It wasn't. She filed her first complaint within 48 hours. Something about unusual humming from my garage. It was my battery core stabilizer running diagnostics. Next came a complaint about my trash bins being suspiciously armored. They weren't armored, just reinforced. And then she filed one for intimidating landscaping. I used gravel instead of mulch. I tried being nice. I waved when I saw her. I didn't escalate, but people like Karen don't need a reason to escalate. They just need proximity. The real surprise wasn't Karen though, it was Eli. Eli lived 2 houses down. 10 years old, mop of curly hair, always wearing a t-shirt with a dinosaur or a spaceship on it. He'd pass by on his scooter, slowing just a little near my driveway. At first I ignored it, but one day he stopped altogether, staring at the garage like it was a spaceship. I cracked the door open just a bit, gave him a nod. "That thing you built, is it a robot?" he asked, wide-eyed. "Kind of," I said. "It's a tool that thinks." He nodded solemnly, like he'd just been entrusted with the launch codes. Most kids his age ask too many questions. Eli asked one, then came back the next day with a drawing of his own security robot, complete with laser eyes and a cape. I laughed harder than I had in years. I didn't tell him what I really built in that garage. Tools, yes, but also prototypes meant to save lives in places the news cycle forgets. After a while, the hum of diagnostics and welding torches became background noise to him. He'd sit on the curb and sketch while I worked. Karen didn't like that. One afternoon, I caught her whispering to Eli's mum on the sidewalk. The next day, Eli didn't stop by. The day after, his sketches were missing from the front of my fridge. I didn't blame them. I knew how fear worked. It starts with questions, then doubts, then silence. People like Karen thrived on that kind of quiet. They shaped it into control. So I closed the garage. I installed blackout panels and restricted remote access. Every system inside went dark unless activated by my direct presence. I started operating like I used to, invisible, alert, and 2 steps ahead. But even that wasn't enough. Karen's concerns grew bolder. She proposed a neighborhood ordinance requiring garage inspections. "To ensure safety and transparency," she said, at the next HOA meeting. I sat in the back, arms crossed, and asked, "What exactly are we inspecting for?" "Secret robot armies." A few neighbors laughed. She didn't. From that day forward, she began walking by my house more often, sometimes twice a day. Once I caught her taking photos through the hedges. Another time, she faked losing a frisbee and asked to pop in real quick. I tossed it back over the fence without a word. I told myself she'd get bored eventually. I was wrong. Karen wasn't just curious. She was on a mission. And while I had seen my fair share of extremists in my life, I had never encountered someone so determined to unmask a perceived threat that didn't exist yet. What she didn't realize What she couldn't have possibly understood was that I wasn't hiding something dangerous in that garage. I was keeping the danger out, but lines were being drawn. The neighborhood wasn't sure what to believe anymore. The whispering grew louder. People began crossing the street instead of walking past my driveway. And Eli? He still glanced over once in a while, but now with a quick, nervous smile and a mother watching from the porch. I had moved here to disappear, but it was too late for that now. I didn't sleep much after that week, not because I was afraid. Fear was a luxury long burned out of me, but because I could feel the situation tilting, like pressure shifting in the air before a storm. Karen wasn't bored. She wasn't retreating. She was regrouping, and I made the mistake of underestimating how far she was willing to go. It started with a note taped to my front door. Garage audit scheduled for Thursday. HOA compliance initiative. Be prepared for inspection. No signature. Just the HOA logo printed from a copy machine that had clearly seen better decades. I stood on the porch, holding the paper like it might catch fire in my hand. She wanted inside. Not metaphorically. Literally. The following night, I attended the HOA meeting out of sheer principle. I took my usual spot in the back row, near the coffee machine that hadn't been cleaned since the Bush administration. Karen stood at the front beside a projector that displayed exactly one slide, a blown-up version of my garage door. "This is what we're talking about," she said, pacing like a TED talk on paranoia. "Industrial-grade locking mechanisms, opaque barriers, no transparency. This is not what community safety looks like." A man with a receding hairline and a name tag that read Phil, HOA treasurer, cleared his throat. I think he just likes privacy." Karen spun like he'd cursed at her. "Privacy is important, but this isn't privacy. This is secrecy, and secrecy leads to danger." I raised my hand. Slowly. She narrowed her eyes but nodded. "I'd like to clarify something," I said calmly. "My garage is not a meth lab, nor a bomb shelter, nor a robot uprising in progress. It's a certified private workshop approved by the city under Residential Zoning Clause 8.3. If anyone would like to read the document, I've brought copies." I held up a folder. No one moved. "Also," I added, "if you're that concerned about what's behind my garage door, maybe we should inspect Karen's browser history next. Just for balance." A few people laughed. Phil snorted into his coffee. Karen didn't blink. "This is not a joke, Mr. Dawson," she snapped. "You could be endangering all of us." "Only if someone's stupid enough to break in," I said, smiling just enough for it to sting. Her jaw tightened. I'd hit a nerve. The board agreed, reluctantly, that unless I was found in violation of a specific code, no inspection could be forced. That didn't stop Karen from glaring at me like she was already drafting the next 10 complaints in her head. After the meeting, I walked home under a quiet sky, but I didn't make it 10 feet before I heard it. "Mr. Dawson." I turned. Karen stood at the edge of the clubhouse walkway, arms folded, face taut. "You think this is over?" "No," I said. "I think you're going to keep pushing until something pushes back." "I'm doing this for everyone's safety." "No," I corrected. "You're doing this because you don't understand what you're looking at. And when people don't understand something, they either leave it alone or they try to control it. I don't trust people with secrets, and I don't trust people with clipboards." We stared each other down for a full 10 seconds. Then she turned on her heel and walked into the dark. That was the last time she spoke to me directly. The next few days were quiet, but not in the way I liked. A forced quiet, the kind that meant something was brewing. My motion sensors began pinging at odd hours, low, deliberate movements just outside detection zones. Someone had tossed a ball over my fence and didn't come to retrieve it. My trash bins were moved half an inch from their usual spot. Petty but precise. She was testing boundaries. Then Thursday arrived. There was no inspection, no HOA, no clipboard committee, but there was a breach. 2:03 a.m. My silent alarm tripped. East perimeter. The doggy door. I don't own a dog. I rolled out of bed, already half dressed from years of habit. The garage feed on my tablet lit up, and there she was, Karen, in full black workout gear, elbow deep in Crisco, dragging a yoga mat across my epoxy floor like she was reenacting Die Hard, with less grace and more grease. She muttered to herself as she crawled, "Unauthorized storage, probably illegal, no compliance badge." I didn't move. I just watched. The prototype targeting system chirped online. A low hum filled the garage as the motion grid activated. She was inches from the crate marked, "Do not disturb unless you're tired of breathing." The suppression net primed. I had 90 seconds to shut it down before it wrapped her up like the world's angriest spring roll. I bolted, out the side door, down the gravel, and into the garage. "Voice override!" I barked. The system paused. Karen shrieked as the emitters retracted. She scrambled behind a workbench, slipping on the coolant spill I'd meant to clean earlier, and then she saw it. The tactical prototypes, the armored gear, the tools labeled with serial codes and test batch numbers. "I knew it!" she shouted. "You're building weapons!" I exhaled slowly. "That's a smart wrench. It adjusts torque based on vibration feedback." "You're lying! You're trespassing. This is a violation of—" "This," I interrupted, "is a certified lab with federal clearance. You just broke into it, and now you're one step from a felony." She looked around, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. Synthetic grease smeared down her leggings. A comms wire was tangled around her ankle, and one of my surveillance drones was now hovering quietly in the corner, watching. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not supposed to be here." I met her eyes. "Neither are you." The silence after the incident was deafening. Karen didn't scream. She didn't call the police. She didn't even threaten a lawsuit. Not immediately, anyway. She just stormed out of my garage, trailing a thin line of synthetic grease and shredded dignity. I stood in the doorway long after she disappeared into the shadows, the net launcher still retracting with a soft mechanical whir behind me. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. I locked down the garage tighter than ever, triple sealed the entrances, ran full diagnostic sweeps every hour, and logged her biometric signature into my alert system. If she so much as sneezed within 20 feet of my property again, I'd know. The whole system would know. But it wasn't over. Of course it wasn't. By noon the next day, 2 patrol officers knocked on my door. "Mr. Dawson?" one said, polite but cautious. "That's me," I answered, stepping out onto the porch, coffee in hand. "Let me guess. Domestic disturbance complaint." They exchanged a quick look. "Just a routine follow-up. Someone reported a confrontation." I nodded and invited them in. Inside the garage, I queued up the security feed. The footage played. Karen crawling under the tripwire grid like a slug on a Crisco slip and slide, muttering conspiracy theories as she neared a crate labeled in large stenciled letters. "Do not disturb unless you're tired of breathing." One of the officers chuckled. The other tried and failed to stifle a laugh when she slipped and took down a shelf of non-lethal equipment. "Honestly," the first one said, "this is better than our training tapes." They asked what I did for a living. I gave them the vague but true answer. Consulting. Tactical systems. Government adjacent. They didn't press further, just asked for a copy of the footage for documentation, they said. But I caught the smirk. They left with a friendly handshake and a not-so-friendly warning aimed squarely at Karen. Still, the damage wasn't done echoing. The following morning, a new HOA flyer appeared in every mailbox, printed in bold red Comic Sans, like a cry for help from someone drowning in bureaucracy. "Emergency community meeting. Unregulated military activity suspected. Who is he?" Subtlety wasn't Karen's strong suit. Out of principle, I showed up. The meeting room looked like a dentist's waiting area that had given up on its dreams. Karen stood in front of a projector, one hand trembling slightly as she flipped to a slide titled concerning observations. She launched into a monologue about community safety, secret government labs, and the unnatural stillness of my garage. "I've heard explosions," she said. I leaned forward. "I tested a sonic barrier shield once. It barely broke 60 decibels. You're harboring unlicensed tech. You're harboring a grudge." The room went quiet. Finally, I stood. Let's be clear. Karen broke into my private, federally audited workshop, got herself tangled in a legal anti-intrusion system, and is now trying to reverse blame me because she didn't like what she saw. A few neighbors chuckled. One woman in a cardigan whispered something that made the guy next to her snort. Karen's face flushed crimson. "This isn't about me," she said. "This is about safety. No civilian needs biometric locks or infrared tripwires unless they're hiding something dangerous." I folded my arms. "Or unless they're trying to keep dangerous people out." That shut her up. For now. The board ruled in my favor, not because they liked me, but because facts are harder to fight than feelings. I wasn't violating any HOA codes, and unless they rewrote the bylaws overnight, they had no legal grounds to enter my garage. Karen left in a storm of whispers and muttered threats, but I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about Eli. He hadn't stopped by in days. No sketches on the curb, no curious questions, no wide-eyed wonder. His parents had probably seen the flyers. Maybe they watched Karen's slideshow and decided it wasn't worth the risk. I didn't blame them, but that didn't make the silence any easier. I sat alone on my porch that night, sipping cold coffee and listening to the hum of the garage as it ran a fresh diagnostic. The sun dipped low behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the street. The neighborhood, once just background noise in my life, now felt like something else entirely, like a line had been drawn, not in sand, but in dust and suspicion. A door creaked open 2 houses down. Eli stepped out. He stood on the porch, looking both ways like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to move. Then he caught my eye. For a second I thought he might wave. He didn't, but he gave me the smallest nod. Barely more than a twitch, then turned and went back inside. I stared at the empty street long after he was gone. Karen had drawn her battle lines. The neighborhood had started choosing sides, and Eli, he was stuck in the middle. The days that followed were quiet in the most artificial way. No more flyers, no more HOA meetings, no more Karen on the sidewalk, squinting over a clipboard like a general planning her next invasion. But I didn't buy the silence. Karen wasn't the type to accept defeat. She was the type to regroup, and regroup she did. It started with the trash. One morning, I opened my bin to find an empty ammunition case. Wrong caliber, wrong manufacturer, and definitely not mine. I didn't even use that kind of roundback in my active days. The casing still had a faint fingerprint smudge, like someone had worn gloves, and then thought better of it. 2 days later, I found a canister in my recycling bin, labeled Tactical Lubricant, Military Use Only, bright orange. Cheap label, probably printed from a home office in between watching conspiracy theory videos. It would have been laughable if it wasn't so calculated. I checked my footage, of course. There she was, 2:11 a.m., hoodie up, gloves on, crouched like she was auditioning for an episode of Amateur Espionage Weekly. She planted the items and then adjusted a fanny pack with glittery letters spelling out HOAENFORCEMENT. Subtle as a flashbang in a library. 2 board members came by that afternoon, sheepish and uncomfortable. Karen filed a complaint, one of them said she found suspicious items discarded improperly. I didn't say a word. I just played the footage. Karen planting the evidence. Karen slipping on her way out and falling headfirst into her own recycling bin. Karen struggling to untangle herself from a hose while still whispering, "I know what I saw." The board members exchanged glances. "We'll have a talk," one of them muttered. I didn't hold my breath. Instead, I made a call. Lieutenant Miguel Ramirez. We'd served together years ago, back when missions had no names and time zones were just suggestions. He was a field coordinator now, liaising between civilian contractors and military development projects. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but as soon as I explained what was happening, he burst out laughing. "This sounds like a sitcom, man." "It's turning into a siege. Want me to drop a Black Hawk on her lawn?" "Tempting," I said, "but I need something smarter." We built the plan together, a community security demonstration, sanctioned by the city under an experimental tech grant, legal, public, and entirely above board. Ramirez would bring in a civilian-facing demo team, I'd handle the neighborhood optics, and together we'd turn Karen's paranoia into an education seminar. The city approved the request in under 24 hours. Apparently someone upstairs had a sense of humor. That night, as I ran diagnostics in the garage, I heard a light knock. I opened the door expecting another complaint. Instead, I found a rolled-up piece of paper sitting on the mat. It was a drawing, crayons on printer paper, a robot, boxy and smiling, with Defender written across its chest and two kids standing beside it, arms raised like superheroes. One of the kids looked suspiciously like Eli, curly hair, wide eyes. The other? I wasn't sure. Maybe it was just another kid, or maybe, in his head, it was me. Taped to the back was a sticky note. "I know you're one of the good guys." I stood there longer than I cared to admit, that drawing in my hand, the garage lights humming behind me like a heart still beating in the dark. Karen thought she was building a case against me, but what she didn't realize was that I had already been building something too, quietly, slowly, with purpose. Not just systems, not just defense, but trust. The kind that couldn't be planted, faked, or photoshopped. That drawing went straight on the wall above my main workbench, next to my certificates, next to my first schematic, a reminder that not everything worth protecting was made of circuits and steel. Some things were made of crayon and courage. The drawing stayed on my wall as I prepped for war, though in this case the battlefield was the HOA clubhouse, and the warheads were battery-powered and demo-approved. Ramirez and I coordinated everything down to the second. His team, dressed in civilian polos and khakis, would roll in with the gear at 0900 sharp. Drones, vault systems, biometric locks, suppression bots, all scrubbed of any military markings and wrapped in the friendly gloss of a community safety outreach program. Everything we did was legal, public, educative, but every detail was chosen to make one specific person sweat. Karen. The day of the demo arrived like thunder in a blue sky. Sun blazing, kids on scooters, folding chairs blooming across the cul-de-sac like spring weeds. Neighbors filed in with curiosity written all over their faces. Some brought lemonade, others brought suspicion. I brought facts. Ramirez shook my hand in front of everyone like we hadn't shared blackout missions in hostile zones. "Mr. Dawson," he said formally, "thank you for inviting us into your community." "Pleasure," I said, playing along. "I hope this helps ease a few minds." He smiled. It usually does. Karen arrived 10 minutes late, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like a life raft. She paused when she saw Ramirez's team unloading a small biometric vault onto the clubhouse lawn. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The demonstration began with a friendly walkthrough. Ramirez explained the technology, how the vaults worked, how drones could secure a backyard without invading privacy, how tripwire systems could alert homeowners to threats without harming anyone. Everything was clean, smart, safe. Everything was also eerily similar to my own setup. A few HOA members whispered among themselves. One man murmured, "Looks just like Dawson's gear," to which someone replied, "Maybe he actually knows what he's doing." Karen was pale. She kept scanning the crowd, looking for someone, anyone, to share her panic. But the room was shifting. Then Ramirez pulled up a drone surveillance report. "This is a sample of unauthorized devices we've seen across neighborhoods," he said. "Some built at home, often illegal to deploy." He clicked to the next slide. Karen's drone signature popped up on the screen, unmistakable. Crude signal. No encryption. Funny thing, he continued. We intercepted one of these just last week, flying over a private workshop. Karen gasped, audibly. We traced it back to an origin point here in the neighborhood, Ramirez added smoothly. Could have been a mistake, could have been curiosity, but in the wrong context, it's a felony. She stepped backward into a lawn chair. The metal creaked, and then came the finale. Ramirez handed the mic to me. Mr. Dawson, he said, would you like to demonstrate your latest prototype? I stepped forward, holding a small remote. Of course. I pressed the button. The garage door at my house, across the street, opened smoothly. A small platform rose from the floor. On it sat a device no larger than a Roomba, painted matte grey with soft blue LEDs blinking gently. It extended an arm and waved, then it projected a hologram in midair. Neighborhood Watch 2.0. We've got your back. There was an audible gasp. One of the kids clapped. Someone said, "No way!" under their breath. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a bee. The board president stood. Mr. Dawson, on behalf of the HOA, I'd like to thank you for this enlightening presentation. He handed me a printed certificate, purely ceremonial, but beautifully designed. It read, Certified Safe Resident, Community Technology Contributor. The same man who once asked if my trash bins were bulletproof now clapped me on the shoulder and said, Guess you're not hiding a missile silo, huh? I smiled politely. Karen disappeared into the clubhouse bathroom and didn't come out for 30 minutes. The day ended in laughter, lemonade, and a few dozen requests from neighbors asking if I could help install motion sensors or teach their kids how to build non-scary robots. The shift was seismic. A neighborhood that had once crossed the street to avoid me now offered brisket and solar panels. But the night wasn't over. I was back on my porch, sipping a victory drink, when my perimeter system pinged. A motion alert. I pulled up the feed. Karen, again. This time, she had a ladder. She was climbing up the back of my porch in broad daylight, 3 p.m., July sun blazing, dressed in black like she thought she could stealth her way through solar flares. In her hand, a manila envelope. The microphone caught her muttering, I'll serve him myself if the system won't. As soon as she touched the garage door, the speaker system kicked in with its pre-recorded message. Hi, Karen. Please step away from the property. This is your third uninvited visit. This action is being recorded and has triggered an automated notification to the local precinct. She froze, looked around like she was hoping for a sinkhole to open beneath her feet, then tried to walk away as if nothing happened. She didn't make it to the sidewalk before a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers got out, casual, almost amused. They took the envelope from her, glanced at it, then strolled up to my porch. Looks like she filed another small claims complaint, one said, handing me the papers. Something about psychological warfare via keypad. I laughed. He did too. By the way, that drone footage, better than our last 3 training modules. We may owe you royalties. They left. Karen sulked back to her house, and I finally sat back and exhaled. The war wasn't over, not completely, but the tide had turned. The community had seen the truth. The HOA had shifted. Karen's grip had cracked, and maybe most important of all, when I looked across the street, I saw Eli on his porch, holding a toy robot made from cereal boxes and glue sticks. He lifted it in the air like a trophy and grinned. I saluted. He saluted back. The days that followed felt like the air after a thunderstorm. Charged, clean, and oddly calm. For the first time since I moved into this neighborhood, people smiled when they passed my driveway. The whispers were gone. The stares had turned into nods, and the silence, finally, wasn't laced with suspicion. Karen's house, once the unofficial surveillance hub of the HOA, went dark. Literally. Curtains drawn, mail uncollected, no clipboard sightings. Rumor had it she'd stepped down from the HOA for medical reasons. Others whispered about an emergency board meeting where someone finally told her, point blank, to back off. I didn't care what story people chose to believe. What mattered was that she was done. But the neighborhood wasn't finished. Not with me. It started with Mr. Halia, 3 doors down. He brought over a full smoked brisket one afternoon and asked if I could help him install a garage camera. Then Sheila, the same neighbor who once reported me for not edging my lawn properly, offered to host a community potluck in my honor. "For everything you've done," she said, awkwardly avoiding eye contact, "and for making Karen cry in public." Apparently, that had bonded people more than I ever expected. By the weekend, the cul-de-sac transformed. Folding tables lined the sidewalks. Lawn chairs were scattered like campfire seating. Someone brought a karaoke machine. Another brought cupcakes with edible drone toppers. I stood by the grill flipping burgers, while kids ran around pretending to be security bots. Someone had even made a t-shirt that read HOA Defense Force, powered by Rex. I pretended not to notice, but I smiled. Eli approached me in the middle of the chaos, holding a plastic toolbox almost bigger than he was. "Want to help me build a motion alarm for my treehouse?" he asked. "Only if you promise not to point it at squirrels." "No promises," he grinned. Halfway through the event, the HOA board showed up. Not with complaints, but with a certificate printed on fake parchment paper and stamped with gold foil stars. It read, "Honorary HOA Defense Specialist, Defender of Driveways, Keeper of the Tactical Code." It was ridiculous and surprisingly touching. They shook my hand, posed for a few group photos, and then, in a quieter tone, the board president leaned in. "We're revising the HOA guidelines," he said. "No more surprise garage inspections. No more drone loopholes. You shut her down so hard, we're rewriting policy." I nodded. It was more than I expected. Maybe more than I deserved. But of course, Karen couldn't vanish without one last encore. 3 days after the potluck, I got a notification. Unusual motion on my property. It wasn't a breach, just odd. I checked the camera. There she was, Karen, climbing onto my back porch using a ladder she clearly borrowed from a neighbor's shed, dressed in black again. At 3 p.m., again. She held another manila envelope. The camera mic picked up her voice. "I'll serve him myself if the system won't." She touched the edge of my garage door. The speaker activated. "Hi, Karen. Please step away from the property. This is your 3rd uninvited visit. This action is being recorded and has triggered an automated notification to the local precinct." She froze, tried to back away casually. Didn't make it 2 steps before a patrol car pulled up. The officers took the envelope, walked over, and handed it to me. "She filed another small claim suit," one of them said, sighing. "This one's about psychological trauma caused by keypad messages and community betrayal." I chuckled. "Toss it in the bin. I've got more important things to do, like building a motion-triggered sprinkler that spells her name." The officer grinned. "You've got fans at the station, you know. That drone footage, best training video we've seen in years." That night, I finished the sprinkler. It didn't actually spell Karen, but it did spray a pleasant mist and light up in soft purple if triggered. I called it the Karen Cloud. The next morning, a kid ran through it by accident and squealed with laughter. Apparently, tactical deterrents make great playground gear. Later that week, I received a letter, official looking, but not from the HOA or the court. It was from the city's public safety commissioner. They thanked me for my role in the security demonstration and invited me to join a civilian advisory council on urban safety integration. Said they wanted people who understand both technology and community trust. I stared at the letter, then looked around my garage. Half of what was in there started as experiments, jokes, or therapy after too many years in the dark. Now somehow, this bizarre HOA saga had turned them into community assets. It felt right. So I said yes. As for Karen, she sold her house 3 weeks later. Moved to a gated community on the other side of the city where the HOA was run by retired federal judges and 3 lawyers with nothing but time. Probably the only place left where her style of control might be tolerated or litigated into oblivion. Her house was bought by a young couple. They knocked on my door their first week. "Hi, we were thinking of installing motion lighting. Would that be okay with you?" I smiled. "Absolutely. I'll help you set it up. First one's on me." They brought cookies, no clipboards. Months passed. The neighborhood settled into a new kind of quiet. Not fearful, but secure. People still asked me for help. Security installs. Sensor tweaks. Sometimes just advice. My garage, once a fortress of solitude, had become something else entirely. A symbol of calm readiness, shared learning, and a little bit of rebellion. I even added a side entrance. Clean floors, wall-mounted demos, workshop Saturdays for the local kids. One evening I stepped outside and saw a drone hovering over the park. Not one of mine, just a store-bought model, flown by a teenager from down the street. He saw me and waved. I waved back. Karen had come into my life to tear down a mystery. Instead, she helped build a legacy.